It's really nice to see all of you here. Our goal is to educate voters, and so it's nice to see a lot of people here to learn. We're going to be talking about Proposition 1 tonight. Many of you here already know how you're voting, and hopefully you'll leave here armed with enough knowledge to convince others as well. And if you aren't sure about how to vote, hopefully you'll leave here knowing that. This event is being put on by ourselves, Panhandle Republican Women, and the Boundary County Central Committee. Kayla Davis is there in the back as the vice chair. I'm going to bring up Pastor Munoz to give us the invocation.
Thank you. Just before I pray, just so you know, if anyone needs the restroom back in the building to the right, there's two of them. They're Jack and Jill, so it doesn't matter which one you use, but just so you know where they're located. But if you would pray with me, please. Father in heaven, we just want to thank you for today. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful place to live. And to know, Lord, that it's your artistry that brought that about. And Father, we do bow before you, and we ask that this nation would return to righteousness.
Amen.
Lord, you teach us very clearly that righteousness is the mark of a nation. You teach us that a righteous people will acknowledge you, will bow before you, and recognize that only your laws will bring freedom. And Father, we ask for continued freedom because we're losing it. We ask that you would bless this nation, bless those that are running, that righteousness would win this year, including on how we conduct our elections. So Lord, we pray that you would be glorified, that we would be informed this evening. Bless the speakers. I pray for clarity. And ultimately, Lord, may this nation return to what blessed us in the first place. And that's honoring you. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And now, if you join me in the pledge, flag is over there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I especially want to thank Pastor Munoz because he came through for us when our venue fell through to allow us to have this meeting here. So I would like to point out that their donation box is over there next to that counter on that red table over there. So if you wouldn't mind, show him our thanks on your way out, please. My first speaker is here.
Oh no, I thought it was 6:30.
No, 6. But you're here, so that's good. Okay, I'm going to bring up the Bonner County Clerk. One of the things you'll find during this evening is that Proposition 1, the issue is not about partisanship. There's nothing it goes far beyond that, and you're going to find that out tonight. So I'm going to introduce our Bonner County Clerk, who's going to tell you how it's going to affect his office.
Screen right here?
Yes.
I guess this works. I can do that. So this is obviously, everybody here is a registered this or that, and everybody has their own points of view. Everybody, feel strongly about that, including the county clerks, both ways, all that kind of stuff. This isn't going to be about that, because I know we all go to the polls and we all vote the way we want to vote, and we all strongly. That's why we're at meetings like this. So I'm going to tell you, not on a partisan basis, what you should or shouldn't do. I'm going to tell you how this affects county clerks. So Bonner County has one of the safest, if not Bonner and Boundary, let me rephrase it, Idaho has one of the safest election systems in the entire country. We have a situation in Idaho where nothing gets transferred over the internet. It's localized. Other states like Alaska, I believe it's centralized elections. Idaho, it's all county by county. So you have a county clerk, you have Linda posted here in your county that oversees, you have 6 precincts, the voting, counting, everything here. When she does that and she gets the totals, she, like I, then transfer those numbers to the Secretary of State, and we can check and make sure that what the Secretary of State puts on the website is exactly what we have here locally. That is one of the safest things we can do. One of the concerns of the county clerks throughout all 44 counties is the fact that we would not be able to do that. Local races, we could, because a local 2-man race, we could still do locally. 3-man races, we can't resolve locally. We have to use a software that can do multiple iterations. And that is the hard thing. And the way you do that is to send it to the Secretary of State and or to another place, and they will tell you who the winner is. I was just asked on Tuesday night at the Republican Central Committee, or actually it was Tuesday day on the radio with Barbara Carpenter, what kind of confidence level I have in that. If we have to upload our data over the internet, which right now is illegal in Idaho law, we cannot do that. If we have to upload this big lump of data, and we can't tell you who the winner is, and we send it to somebody, and there's only a couple people that can do it right now that are certified, you'll be happy to know. One of them is Dominion. Exactly. One of them is Dominion, the other one is Clear Ballot Group. Those are the only 2 certified election organizations in the country that can do this right now. At least that we have access to. We have access to. The Secretary of State would try to work with another group to try to figure out something at the Secretary of State's level. But in every case, we are sending our data blindly to another situation was even in 2-man races for 2 county districts, like legislative district number 1, where we have right now. We're both in legislative district number 1, Bonner County and Boundary County. We can't tell you who the winner is. We would have to ship that out somewhere else, and they will tell us who the winner is. So that's a really, really tough thing. Yes, sir?
Is that the way it exists now?
No. The way it exists right now is we upload our data. We have our results. We post our results on a portal with the Secretary of State site. It's a 10X website. We upload our results. We can check that when it shows on the Secretary of State site against what we have here in our own county. They combine them, and they by county, you can see legislative district 1, winner, losers, all that kind of stuff. But we can trail it. We can follow the trail and find out exactly how many votes this person got in my county, in your county, and we won't be able to do that clearly. Another difficult thing will be every one of us, me included, has the right to say, I don't like the results and I want to recount. It will be impossible for us to recount it. To recount, we would say, okay, black box, here you go again. Please tell us the answer again. And hopefully it's the same answer, so that's the tough. So that logistically is tough. I understand that ES&S, which is Boundary County's election system, and Bonner County's system is art. Both of them can make a ballot with the boxes, so we can create the actual paper ballot that you can mark for ranked choice voting. We just can't compute them. We can't scan them and tell you what the answers are. So we can scan them, but then we have to send that information off to somewhere else. Do you want me to sing? I can sing. There we go.
Talk closer to the mic.
So that's basically the biggest difficulty we have. We no longer have local control of our elections if that's the case. And that's why I have a hard time. Whether the candidate I want or don't want wins, that's a different matter. For a county clerk's job of making sure elections are secure, that is the heartburn that most of the county clerks have. questions. I thought I was coming to answer some questions, so yes, ma'am,
Do
thank
you have
you.
the bill, the proposition, the wording that's gonna be on the ballot with you?
I don't have the wording on the ballot with me, but I do know that part of what it says
Because
is,
it mentioned the ranked choice voting on
It does.
yes,
Yes.
it does on the ballot. One of the lines, well, yeah, I don't know, it does. It's a two, Prop 1 has two things. One is it gets rid of partisan primaries, and the second part is ranked choice for the November. So ranked gets rid of the partisan primaries and changes that to a top 4. So you could have lots of people, and the top 4 advance to November. And then in November, you have the ranked choice voting. Now, there's been a misnomer out there that everybody, if you only vote once, your vote will cease to count. That's not true. Your vote will count the entire time unless your particular candidate gets the least amount of votes in one of the elimination rounds, and of course, your candidate's out. But if you vote for a certain candidate and they do another iteration and your candidate is getting additional votes every additional round, as is everybody else, your vote still counts. It's just that you wouldn't contribute once your candidate happens to hit the bottom of the barrel. Then you get pulled out. Yes?
Can you talk about how much of the law is left up to interpretation by the individual county clerks?
Well, right now, so one thing you want, and a lot of people don't like this, but they say, I think we should do elections, and this is not a loaded question, you may not get the answer you want, but a lot of people say, I think we should do elections this way or that way, and I think we should disallow this or disallow this type of person to vote with this kind of ID or that, whatever. All 44 counties have a law that we have to follow. As soon as we start doing it our own way in each county by county, that's a version of anarchy, and you don't want that. We have our legislatures, which we elect to set the rules that all the county clerks have to file. The county clerks have a ministerial position, meaning that we literally have to follow what the legislature, the government, the laws they make, what they prescribe for us to do. So we can't go outside those laws. This is going to be completely unknown if it passes, simply because right now it would violate our known laws. One is which you can't send your election data over the internet for it to be calculated. Yes?
I really do not know the answer to this question. I don't know if you will either. But for that top 4 primary, is there any limit to how many people can enter a race?
No. So you could have 100. You could have 100. So it'd be a long ballot.
For each position.
For each
Right.
race. I know it's a lot, but I didn't know if there was some cap.
Right. And with the top 4 primary, you don't have to affiliate with the party. You can affiliate. You can say you're another party and not actually be affiliated with that party. The actual wording is candidates could list any affiliation on the ballot, but would not represent political parties and need not be associated with the party they name. So that's that.
And do you know off the top of your head how many races are typically on a ballot? Like just average?
It depends. So primary, you get a lot, and here's why. On the odd years, you have all the local taxing districts. You have your water, sewer, library, school, fire, all sorts of different taxing districts, different people running for different slots in those taxing districts. In the even year, you have the partisan races, which are Republican, Democrat, Constitutional, Libertarians, and unaffiliated. Those tend to be fewer. So, and it depends if you only get one person. If you only get one person signed up for a slot, in some races, you don't even have to have the race. In some others, like a county clerk, you have to have it no matter what. Or county clerk, assessor, sheriff, treasurers. From the county level up, you have to post it no matter what. Yes, ma'am.
I'm hearing that ballots are going to be thrown out for certain reasons. Can you explain that to us, please?
So, what I understand, and I'm not the expert on this at all, what I understand by thrown out would be, If you voted for candidate A, and you have, let's say, A, B, C, D, and D is the one that gets the least votes. So then everybody that voted for candidate D would get thrown out. I think this gentleman knows more. He's the actual speaker. Are you the actual speaker? Perfect. He can save me. But until your candidate hits that bottom vote getter and they strike you and they move what your next vote would have been and they spread it out with the rest, your vote would still hold. So they don't actually throw your paper ballot away, they would show the electronic counting. So if they do a recount, they would still have the data and they would still upload that. My understanding. Are you from Alaska?
No.
You are? Yes.
So I saw somewhere that's like gonna be $430,000, is that for the state of Idaho to implement this ranked choice voting system?
So that's not clear because it depends on how they go about doing it if it got voted in. If all the counties had to get new computer equipment, I don't know if that's the case, because if they did, it would be $25 to $40 million. Right. If HART and ES&S, which are the two that provide election services for Idaho, if they can create a system using an open source system, and there is one right now, they might be able to use, hold on. I was so excited to answer questions second. I wasn't excited to start. This makes it way more fun. RankChoiceVoting.org is the one that apparently ES&S and HART have conversed with. They don't have it set up yet. If that's the case, each county could get a central count machine that could resolve local questions, but it could not resolve multiple county questions. So like District 1, our state legislature, it couldn't be our U.S. senators, Republican representatives, presidents, it could not do that. It could not resolve our measures, anything like that. Those all have to go, and we have to just trust in whatever they tell us. See, that's one of the things that Idaho is really good at, is that you can backtrack. We have to, by law, keep our paper ballots. You have paper ballots, I think you have paper ballots here. Don't you have paper ballots? And you keep them for a certain amount of time, at least 2 years, and you can do a recount. And that's very important to be able to do a recount. Yes.
You said that the counting machine that you have now, it actually will print our ballots, or that you do print our ballots?
So we have different systems. You have ES&S and we have HART. I can talk about my system. I don't know your system.
No, I'm Bonner County.
Okay, you are. We actually build our own ballots. We don't send them off to a third party. We don't have anybody else program our stuff. We don't have anybody touch our stuff. So we build our own ballots in our own software. We print our own ballots for absentee and early votes. And we print our own ballots for election day, and they're exactly the same ballot. What was your question again?
That was the whole question.
Yep, that was it. So nobody touches it. So then we do a logic and accuracy test to make sure that when we scan ballots, it actually, what people mark is what shows up on our report. This test deck is something like 1,230 ballots that I personally mark. And there's a formula for doing it, and it gives you an answer, and you can see exactly how it turns out, and it's supposed to turn out. Other counties or other states that have somebody else do them, sometimes those test decks are 70 pages long or whatever. And this isn't knocking that. It depends on how many races you have, how many precincts you have, and all that kind of stuff. But that's my experience with what we do. Yes, sir.
I'll have to apologize, I didn't bring my hearing aid.
I'll talk better like this. There we go.
I only hear part of what you're saying, so my comments and my questions might not mirror something you've gone over. It might precede something you haven't covered yet.
Got it.
But I was hoping that we'd have access to copies of the complete text for Proposition 1, because you have to read it get through. Unfortunately, people that make up propositions and bills and whatever, or did not go to Miss Lynch's journalism class. They get overly wordy, and you got to be real careful. In the case of Proposition 1, I understand it has items in there to vote yes or no on, which we might want. But at the same time, they snuck in contrary provisions that we would not be able to live with if we pass it. So it would be nice to read the complete text of Proposition 1 and each person weed out, well, if we vote yes, do we mean no? And if we vote no, do we mean yes? And if we vote to bring it in, we're bringing the bad with the good. Because I am a vowed independent. I don't think anyone should have to state who, what party, or what religion, or anything like this before they can get a ballot to print. So that gives the positives for an open primary, but I understand they've got provisions that we would be wise to say where it says vote no.
Right.
That, we can't be swayed by signs that say vote yes or no. We need to actually see the proposition in its entirety.
Right.
And say where would be the consequences and the unwanted consequences before we vote.
So three things on that. In Bonner County today, I believe we posted all the sample ballots, and so you can read the entire text. I think Glenda's going to be doing that as well. If she hasn't already, she may have beat Bonner County to that. Number 2, there is going to be a voter guide, a pro and a con to those. And number 3, propositions are supposed to be single matter propositions, and that's why there was a legal holdup, because as you said, there are 2 issues. One is the non-partisan primary, and the other one is ranked choice voting. So you have 2 things you're voting on, which isn't supposed to happen. Some apparently, and I'm not the legal expert on that, but that's the topic matter which got it taken to court.
Yeah, it does need to be reworked and resubmitted in a clear manner 4 years from now or 2 years from now.
Right.
I think the way it's worded now, what information I've been able to gather, it is not good in any way.
Right. And to add a little humor to this, because it's so long, it's in small print too.
I have one more question, okay? If anybody has a question.
Go ahead. All right, so if I understood you correctly, that if this proposition passes, by nature of the proposition, is going to violate the law as you stated.
The current law right now does not allow us to send our election data over the internet.
So that being said, people in your position, for all counties, prior to this election, that's going to violate the law that's already in place, you have standing to challenge the legality of this proposition prior to the election. And if that is not being pursued, it needs to be.
So I think the Supreme Court on that ruled that there is no standing until it takes effect. I think that topic has been raised. There are other challenges that have been raised, and I am not the attorney on this or anything. What I understand is that if it passes, then the challenges can come. And you would have between November and May to get that resolved, or undone, or solidified, or whatever, because that's when the first primary that it would take effect, possibly.
So if this proposition passes, does it affect this current year's election system?
No, because November is going to be over. I mean, we're voting for it in November, so everything we're voting on right now is not affected by that. It would be 2025. Possibly, or 26, whenever they pick it in, whenever they can implement it. I did not see language that said when they implement that. There you go.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next speaker is Lyndsey Bertoldo. Lyndsey just moved here from Alaska. In 2022, she was a poll worker there. And she is going to share her experience about what happened with the ranked choice voting in Alaska.
Hello, I would like to thank Elena for inviting me to speak to you today. She knows I'm pretty passionate about this issue. Whatever I say up here is as an individual, and nothing I say is on the behalf of the Panhandle Republican Women. So my name is Lyndsey Bertoldo. As she said, my family and I just moved here this summer from Alaska. I'm here to speak to you about what we experienced, who was behind ranked choice voting in Alaska, why Alaska voted for it, and why Alaskans are expected to repeal it this fall. I will also be sharing with you my personal experience with it at the polls as an election worker in Alaska in the first election implementing it. I want to share with you this because I want you to understand what impact ranked choice voting can have on your voting experience, your trust in your elections, and life in your community in Idaho and in America. But first, a little background on me so you can understand why I care so deeply about ranked choice voting, what it did in Alaska, and why I'm concerned about it coming to Idaho. I'm a veteran. I served in the United States Air Force, and I served in Iraq, and I left behind a new husband and my 6-month-old son.
Could you wait, could you collect yourself because we can't understand?
To defend freedom, I left them behind, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I truly believe that ranked choice voting is an attempt to undo the sacrifices that we veterans have made for freedom. It's an attempt to undo the work we Americans have done to ensure election integrity and each citizen's right to have equal say in our elections. Before I go into the many reasons Alaska and I despise ranked choice voting, I think you should understand a little bit about Alaska's politics, why ranked choice voting was brought to Alaska, who brought it, and why. Alaska has gone from blue to red in recent decades. Alaskans like freedom, guns, oil, the Bible, and Alaska votes for Trump. So many people don't understand why Alaska has a U.S. Senator like Republican Lisa Murkowski, who votes with Democrats more than she votes with Republicans. Lisa Murkowski is the reason Alaska now has ranked choice voting. She was appointed to her seat in 2002 by her father, who had left that seat to become governor of Alaska. In 2004, she beat a Democrat to keep her Senate seat, but in 2010, she lost the primary to a more conservative Republican when she decided to run as a write-in, getting Democrat and independent votes, splitting the Republican vote to win the race, becoming the first senator to win a write-in in over 50 years. Many Alaskans contest those election results to this day. So why is Lisa still Alaska's U.S. Senator? One reason is that Alaska has a lot of independents, libertarians, nonpartisan, and unaffiliated voters. And many of Alaska's Republicans are physically conservative, but not socially. Because Alaska's Trump supporters were enraged at Lisa's opposition to Trump and her votes in recent years, Lisa's supporters realized Alaska was fed up with her. So they came up with a scheme to get her reelected, using a method they called ranked choice voting. They pitched it as open primaries. Sound familiar, Idaho? And they did that because Alaska has so many voters that identify as something other than Republican or Democrat. And And those voters often complain about the quote-unquote two-party system. They figured that if Alaskans wouldn't vote for ranked choice voting, they'd go for open primaries. And that's how they got the signatures necessary to get ranked choice voting on the ballot. And they spent millions in commercials and propaganda to convince people to vote for it, in addition to claiming it would help candidates win who were not Republicans or Democrats. They claimed it would increase voter participation. They claimed it would get more candidates elected that were more in the center politically. And they claimed it would eliminate dark money, which is money donated from outside the state from unknown sources. That all sounded good to a lot of people. It sounded good to me, and I almost voted for it until I looked into who was funding it. According to Phil Eisen, who is a registered independent, and the Alaskan who is the biggest activist against ranked choice voting, and the leader of the group leading its repeal, ranked choice voting is funded by the 1630 Fund, an arm of Arabella Advisors, which is a leftist lobbying organization headquartered in DC. In other words, ranked choice voting was funded by the swamp and the dark money it claimed ranked choice voting would eliminate in our elections. The Alaska Watchman, an online Alaska news outlet, reported in August of 2022 that the group of Murkowski supporters who were behind the ballot measure, Alaskans for Better Elections, was caught on video saying that ranked choice voting would actually get more progressives elected, and that they needed it to get Lisa Murkowski re-elected. They even unapologetically admitted on video that the ballot measure was not presented in a forthcoming manner to Alaskans. So that's what led to Alaskans voting for ranked choice voting. They were deceived. That's how ranked choice voting was sold to Alaskans. Most voters, well, not most, many voters vowed to only vote for one candidate, or not vote at all, shooting themselves in the foot. It would not work out well for those voters who refused to play the game. Ranked choice voting is like a strategic game of chess. Each race is different, so it's hard to explain to seniors and those who do not speak English as their first language especially, how to rank their candidates to their advantage. Leading up to the primary and general election, radio hosts, news journalists, and party officials were finding it difficult to explain it to voters, how it worked and how they should rank their preferred candidates. Even election officials struggled to explain it, and there was a lot of uncertainty about ranked choice voting and how it would be implemented and what might happen in different circumstances. There was a concern election officials might have to make things up as they went along, because there was a lot of unknowns with this complicated new system, which did happen. The head of elections resigned after her first year implementing ranked choice voting. It made the job for election officials much more difficult and radically increased distrust in the voting system, as if it's not bad enough. For example, the Republican who ran against Lisa Murkowski, Kelly Shabaka, requested a recount after the first round of votes were counted, because Kelly was less than 1 percentage point behind Murkowski, and that was a difference of just 1,015 votes. Kelly was denied her right as a candidate to challenge the results of the first round. State law gives her that right in such a close race, but she was told by election officials that ranked choice voting is too complicated for recounts. Yet after this election, the advocates for ranked choice voting shockingly claimed that ranked choice voting eliminates challenges to elections. All of a sudden, everybody's happy. Not so. It's ironic how many times the advocates for ranked choice voting claim it's not really complicated, and then use its complexities as a curtain to hide behind when people ask questions and seek transparency about the election. For the primary election, we did see a large turnout of voters. U.S. Representative Don Young had just passed away, leaving his seat open, so there was a special election held around the same time as the primary to elect someone to fill his seat. He had been in that seat for decades and was the longest serving U.S. representative serving at that time. Alaskans were excited to choose someone new, so we cannot say definitively that ranked choice voting was the reason for the good turnout. Big names were in that U.S. House race, like Sarah Palin. Thanks to ranked choice voting, Alaskans had to research 48 candidates just for this race, because so many people thought that they had a chance of winning now with ranked choice voting. There was even a guy named Santa Claus running for North Pole, Alaska, originally from DC, who identified as a Democrat socialist. Yes, we had some real commie clowns running now, and yes, the guy dressed up like Santa and promised the voters goodies like Medicare for all. Many people thought that they would be happy to have so many candidates all on one ballot, but wound up causing confusion and deception because with ranked choice voting, a candidate could appear on the ballot next to the identifier of whatever party they wanted to be or seem affiliated with, regardless of how they were registered to vote. A Democrat was able to run as a Republican and vice versa, even if that person had never been registered with that party and had never voted for someone from that party. Ranked choice voting was designed to deceive the voter about who they were voting for and what that person stood for. As disastrous as that all may sound, the primary didn't require Alaskans to rank their candidates because that wouldn't happen until the general election. But the primary did help the races to be narrowed down to no more than 4 candidates per race. I was working the polls for the general election, and that was when Alaskans really got to see what ranked choice voting does. I took turns in different roles that day. I checked people in with the voter rolls, gave people their ballot, and helped them to run their ballot through the machine. As a veteran, here's where it got heartbreaking for me. I saw old guys coming in with their hats proudly displaying their veteran status. They voiced their frustration over ranked choice voting and the Dominion machines that are required to count the ballots using ranked choice voting. I sensed that they felt like their wartime service was for nothing and their vote wouldn't count. The poll workers weren't allowed to explain ranked choice voting methods to the voters as much as we would have liked to. And not all the voters confused by it even bothered to ask questions. Voters lingered at the poll booths contemplating their selections. Many ballots were rejected. By the voting machines, because voters had not correctly utilized ranked choice voting. While many different mistakes were made, causing voters' ballots to be kicked back, we saw that the biggest problem was that the voters who were voting for Sarah Palin, they chose her as their first, second, third, and fourth choices. And that was not allowed with ranked choice voting. But those voters did not want to vote for anyone else, and they wanted to try to make sure that Sarah got all 4 of their votes. What happened much of the time is that she got none of their votes. Because when we tried to explain to them that they needed to redo their ballot and could only choose Sarah as their first choice, many of them left without casting a ballot. They refused to vote for someone other than Sarah. Other Palin voters who made this mistake corrected their ballot, but grudgingly, knowing that they would only get 1 vote while other voters might get up to 4 if the other voters ranked all 4 candidates in that race. Many Republicans just couldn't bear it to vote for a Democrat, and many Democrats never would vote for a Republican, so those people felt like they had less say ultimately on who would win than some other voters. I also saw seniors, the elderly, having to ask younger people, sometimes their kids or grandkids, how to vote, and they were humiliated to have to ask others how to vote. People who liked ranked choice voting and the results ridiculed the voters who did not like it or understand how to use it. Some voters didn't fill in the bubble for their first choice candidate. Other voters filled in the first choice bubble for more than 1 candidate, and the machine kicked those ballots back out at them too. So the machines were asking them to correct their ballot, and some of them refused to fix it and cast their ballot that way anyway, which means that their vote didn't count. Many voters walked away from their first election with ranked choice voting with a bad taste in their mouth. The radio stations and news outlets were buzzing about what a disaster ranked choice voting was, even before the results came out, which took weeks. Once Alaskans got the results, well, that was just the last nail in the coffin, and talk of the repeal efforts began. Lisa won the U.S. Senate race, Lisa Murkowski, with less than 50% of the first choice votes. Ranked choice proved to help get her reelected, as her supporters planned, because with every round of voting, she got more and more votes from people who ranked her as their second, third, or fourth candidate. A situation arose in the U.S. House race that caused a lot of confusion and angst. The head of the Division of Elections decided to only allow 3 people on the ballot for the race instead of 4, which ranked choice voting requires, after Al Gross withdrew from the race. He was on the ballot as a nonpartisan, though he was really a Democrat. He threw his support behind the Democrats after he withdrew from the race. And he withdrew after the cutoff date, which was required in order to have your name removed from the ballot. So because it was after the cutoff date, Al Gross was not supposed to be removed from the ballot, but he was. Many people expected Democrat Tara Sweeney to be allowed to take his place as 4th candidate because she was the 5th place candidate after the primary. This would have meant that there would have been 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats in the race, which would have split both the Republican and Democrat votes. However, Tara wasn't allowed on the ballot, so the conservative vote was split and an extreme progressive Democrat won the House race for Don Young's seat with less than 40% of the first choice votes, with about 60% of Alaskans choosing a Republican to represent them as their first option. Unfortunately, many Republicans refused to select the other Republican as their second choice because of infighting, a decision they soon regretted. This year's coming House race with ranked choice voting might be even worse than the one 2 years ago that I just described. This race is again making national news. After the primary earlier this year, 4 candidates were left in the top 4, as required with ranked choice voting. However, 2 of those candidates dropped out, leaving the Democrat incumbent and a Republican challenger on the ballot. Remember, last time this happened in this race, the 5th place candidate in the general was not permitted to be on the ballot in the general. This year, the Division of Elections is allowing both the 5th and 6th candidates to be on the ballot in the general election to take the place of the 3rd and 4th candidates who dropped out. Even though the ranked choice voting law doesn't mention permission for a 6th place candidate to be on the ballot if a person drops out. This year, the 6th place candidate turned out to be a convicted felon serving 20 years in New York federal prison. He's there for threatening elected New Jersey officials, including bomb threats. He had less than 500 votes in the primary, and under ranked choice voting has been able to advance to the top 4 for the general election. There was nothing in the law on ranked choice voting that Alaska voters approved prohibiting convicted felons from being eligible to run for federal office, even though they cannot even legally vote. This man has never even stepped foot in Alaska, and he's not a member of the Alaska Democrat Party, but ranked choice voting allows him to run in Alaska as a Democrat. Even worse, he would only be able to serve in office if he was paroled or pardoned by Joe Biden before his term would begin. Because this candidate is appearing on the ballot as a Democrat and is threatening to take votes from the Democrat incumbent, the Alaska Democrat Party filed a lawsuit to have him removed. The Alaska Supreme Court ruled to let him stay on the ballot in the name of preserving what the voters who approved ranked choice voting wanted, more choices. Apparently, the Alaska Supreme Court believes that between 50 and 51% of Alaskan voters wanted the right to choose a convicted felon and prisoner from another state, with less than 500 people choosing that person in the primary. This is one example of several lawsuits which ranked choice voting caused in Alaska. So did ranked choice voting do what it promised? No. Ranked choice voting did what Murkowski's supporters hoped, but not what they had promised voters. They successfully deceived voters. Dark money still poured into the state. Millions of dollars came from out-of-state individuals and PACs to support Lisa Murkowski. Alaskans were angry to find out Mitch McConnell from Kentucky was one of her biggest financial supporters. Only Republicans and Democrats won races. No other party was represented among the winners. While Alaskans overwhelmingly identify as conservatives, extreme progressives, not candidates, that were center-aligned won seats. The Democrat that was elected to the U.S. House voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be Speaker of the House 17 times. Because of ranked choice voting, Alaskans have not been represented in D.C. These are some of the reasons why Alaskans like my family and I work to repeal ranked choice voting. Over 700 unpaid Alaskans of all political affiliations from all over Alaska volunteered their time to obtain over 43,000 signatures to get ranked choice voting back on the ballot this fall. It is back on the ballot, and Alaska is expected to repeal ranked choice voting, which passed by less than a percentage point, I should add, and they can't wait to repeal it. Once you have ranked choice voting, it's hard to get rid of. It's taken Alaskan years and being unhappy with it the whole time, and Alaskans couldn't get the help of elected officials to do it by statute because many of them have been elected using it and felt that they may not have been elected without it. Misled Alaskans voted for it, and informed Alaskans will vote to repeal it. They claimed voter turnout would increase, but with each election since the general election in which ranked choice voting was first used, Alaska has seen record low turnout. Alaska just had another primary on August 20th, and they had just less than 97,000 people turn out to vote. That's almost 100,000 people less than the primary in 2022, just 2 years ago. Between ranked choice voting, the Dominion voting machines required to use it, and the refusal of judges to look into the happenings of the 2020 elections, voters have lost faith in elections in Alaska, and people are leaving the state in droves, my family included. When we drove across the border from Canada through Bonner's Ferry into Naples, we saw that billboard about Trump country. And we saw your distrust of the 2020 election results. Ranked choice voting is not the way to help Idaho trust elections. So I will be voting no on Prop 1 because ranked choice voting is not really about open primaries, and each person should just get one vote.
Wow. A question in the back.
I think we should thank Lyndsey for her service.
Of course. Okay, now I'm going to invite up our main speaker who should be able to answer all of our questions. Michael Angiletta is from Secure Idaho Elections. He's a co-founder, and they are working very hard to defeat this. So please welcome Michael Angiletta.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I talked with Phil Izon, the guy who's leading the repeal effort, quite a bit. He's having quite a nice time in Hawaii, though, right now. He should be back in Alaska. And thank you for the County Clerk for maintaining his objectivity. I'm not going to maintain my objectivity, by the way. I'm going to tell you why you should vote no on Proposition 1. First, I am with Secure Idaho Elections. We are nonpartisan. We are a 501c4. And we're dedicated to the long game of securing Idaho elections, and I'll tell you a little bit about the work that's ahead. It's actually kind of shocking to see just how insecure elections are here in Idaho. But for now, I'm going to take my Secure Idaho Elections hat off. I'm just going to be a citizen of North Idaho. I'm from Kootenai County, and we're going to talk. And I'm going to show you data, case studies. So this isn't the first place. Alaska wasn't the first or even the last place that's experienced ranked choice voting. There's been a lot of municipalities across the country, a lot of states. They've all had to try ranked choice voting. I'm going to share with you some of those stories, and I'm going to share with you some of those municipalities that decided, hey, you know what, ranked choice voting is not right for us after all. So hopefully we won't have to get to that point if we vote no on Prop 1. But I want to start here by just setting the table. It's a little blurry, but this is the State of the Union. I don't know if you guys can see those numbers. This is trust and confidence in the key institutions for this republic. Congress, 8%, big business, 14%, media, 14%. In fact, the only two institutions above 50% are the military and small business. This is a republic in crisis. This is a crisis of trust and confidence. And if you look at the US federal government and the federal election system, we're at 22%. This is not a healthy republic. And so I'm going to pose this question to you now, and I'm going to ask you to answer it when I'm done presenting to you. Does ranked choice voting, does Proposition 1, does it build trust in the election system, or does it damage or destroy it? I'm going to let you answer that for yourselves when I'm done. So, Boise State did a public policy survey, and they asked Idahoans. There were a lot of flaws in the survey, but it's still, it's useful enough and statistically significant, where over 2/3 of Idahoans trust Idaho's election system. So when you compare that to the US federal election system, we're doing pretty well. It's kind of a gem, it's kind of a jewel. We don't really want to mess with that. We can probably make it better, but the question is, does Prop 1 make this trust better or worse? I'll have you know, I was scheduled to debate Luke Mayville, the co-founder of Reclaim Idaho in Boise State. Boise was gracious enough to host that debate, and Luke Mayville dropped out of that debate, by the way. There is a forum in Coeur d'Alene that's being hosted by the Prop 1 folks. They're claiming it's both pro and con. They have no members of the No on Prop 1 folks on the panel, and they're not allowing live Q&A. I'll allow Q&A from anybody in this room, including pro Prop 1 people. I'd be happy to answer your questions. I'd much rather have complete, candid truth, and we can discuss and debate if we need to. So we're going to cover what's Prop 1, what are the risks, let's shoot some case studies, and then what can you do about it. Real quick, I'm in Rapture with my family. I'm an aspiring permaculturist. We're trying to create a self-reliant homestead. You know permaculture in the house here? Awesome. It's a long journey though, man. I'm on year 2, learning a lot of things and through a lot of mistakes. And I'm with Secure Idaho Elections. And I just want to tell you here, we're here to stay. We started because of Prop 1, because we see it as a threat to the integrity of the Idaho election system. But now we're here to stay. We've got a lot of work to do. And here's evidence of that. So if you look at the Heritage Foundation, they rank every year all the states on their election integrity. And I was actually shocked to find out we only were ranked 28th in the union. That's kind of a problem. We can do better. And they use all of these different criteria to score us. So this is my way of telling you, once we defeat Proposition 1, Secure Idaho Elections is going to work day and night in Boise with our legislature to make all of these different variants, all of these different attributes stronger and full of more integrity. So that's what our long-term mission is. And we don't have to go into this. Okay, so what's Proposition 1? We kind of already covered it. And you're right, the County Clerk mentioned it makes 2 changes. It introduces 2 changes. The first is they call it an open primary. And it took me a while to learn. It's actually not. It's actually a jungle primary. And you can Google it. There is a definitional difference between an open primary and a jungle primary. An open primary means anybody can vote on a slate for one party. So the Democrats can open up their primary and anybody can vote for the Democrat. That's an open primary. Republicans can do that and Democrats can choose from the Republicans. A jungle primary is a free-for-all. That means, just as our Alaska guest mentioned, you don't have to be any party, you can claim any party and anybody from any party can vote for them. So it's kind of wild, it's kind of like a jungle. That's the first change. And this is the second change, we already kind of covered it, is ranked choice voting. And our county clerk did mention that our AG did file a lawsuit, and the Supreme Court said to rule on the constitutionality of Proposition 1, you must first pass it. So let's try not to figure out if it's constitutional, please. So a jungle primary, I already explained what it looks like, but let me give you an example of how the system's kind of game today. So some of you might remember in the primaries, Nikki Haley was running against Donald Trump. So what happened in New Hampshire and Iowa? A bunch of Democrats registered as Republicans and voted for Nikki Haley. They were very proud of that fact. And that's fine, it's within the rules, and they did it. So my point is, there's going to be some gamesmanship when we get into a jungle primary as well. We're going to see similar elements as well, so nobody will have to switch party registrations anymore. This is the 48 candidates you were mentioning in their open primary for 1 seat. Now, before anybody accuses me of cherry picking, the next open primary election had 22 candidates, okay? So imagine a regular voter who's got a job and a family to feed, trying to research all of these candidates. It's not happening. Now imagine 20 offices on the ballot with this many candidates. It's a possibility. We saw it in Alaska. Well, you already stole my thunder on this one. That's our felon. I'll just show the mugshot. The Democratic Party is suing to get him off of the ballot in Alaska. This is the felon that our guest was talking about. And one of the reasons why you have something like this is you get rid of the vetting process. So say what you will about party politics. I find it pretty disdainful in many ways, especially on the federal level, the 2 sides of the same coin. However, at least on a state level, you have some vetting and you have some representation of the people. And in Idaho, I see, for instance, the Republican Party as kind of representing the grassroots. It's kind of a new phenomenon, and there's a big civil war, quite frankly, going on in the state. Some of you have probably noticed that. So, at the end of the day, one of the claims of the Prop 1 folks is more moderates will be elected through an open/jungle primary. Okay? Well, when we look at the data in California, there's actually some small signals of more moderation of legislation. You can actually look at the bills they offer and co-author. But in Louisiana and Georgia, no evidence at all of more moderation. So it's a real mixed bag, okay? So I'm gonna ask this question. That's why I put this quote here. When we say moderate, when we say moderation in this upside down world we live in today, okay? I ask you, what does that really mean if you have principles, values, and beliefs? So, and I'm gonna be provocative for a second. So, if little Johnny, who's 6 years old, tells his mom, I wanna be a girl, okay? And then they're considering chemically castrating him so he'll never have a child the rest of his life. If I'm a moderate, I'll say, well, that's not appropriate. We should wait until he's 8 years old. My point is, this world, where 2 + 2 = 5, boys can be girls and girls can be boys, is it principled to be moderate about something like that? Or do we take a stand and we draw a line? Okay? If you look at the UK, I don't know if any of you know this, but the Labour Party took power, the Tories were previously in power, they're all considered relatively moderate. They jailed over 1,200 people for online speech. That's a moderate government. France, Macron, the leader of France, a consummate moderate. They temporarily at least jailed the CEO of Telegram for not censoring enough. That's a moderate, okay? So I'd say, what does a moderate get us when we look at our own principles, values, and beliefs at this point? So, I want to go to the second part of the law, which is ranked choice voting. We're not going to read all this. My point is there's a lot of stuff, but what I want to do is do some show and tell now and give you some examples. We're going to skip this video for the sake of your time, and I'm going to go watch. So I can skip this. Keep skipping. Okay. I'm going to walk you through a quick example of ranked choice voting, just so we can kind of visualize what we've all been talking about. So don't mind the names, I didn't come up with them, but they're somewhat relevant. So we got horse crap, Kathy America, Patty Poison, and lukewarm smiles. So we got out of the jungle primary, and we got 4 people. And oh, by the way, when you look across the country, jungle primaries, it's usually top 2 for jungle primaries. But here in Alaska for Prop 1 is 4. Anybody want to guess why it's 4 and not 2? I'll tell you why. Because if there were only 2, chances are they'd both be Republican. If you get 4, you got much better chance of getting a progressive in. Respect to the tactics and strategies. If I were a progressive partisan, I want 4 as well. So, we got 4 candidates here. What you have to do as a voter is you have to rank all 4. Now, Prop 1 proponents will say, you don't have to vote for all 4, you don't have to rank all 4, but as our previous speakers mentioned, then you run the risk of your ballot being tossed. If you only vote for the one you really like, and you don't want to vote and rank the ones you totally find repugnant, and the one you like is gone, you have no more say, it's gone. Hasta la vista, okay? So anyways, we rank all 4. It kind of looks like this, so we'll go through a scenario. This is round 1 of ranked choice voting, and Horse Crap got the least amount of first rank votes. He got 9. Kathy America got the most with 42, and then you can see the second and third position. So what happens to the votes and the ballots that chose Horse Crap as their number 1 ranked choice? Well, they get reallocated. So now we look at all the people that voted for Horse Crap, and we go to their second ranked choice, and we reallocate. And those votes then go 2 to Kathy America, 1 to Lukewarm Smiles, 2 to Patty Poison. Oh wait, what's this? 4 go in the garbage can. I'm going to show you some real-world ballots from New Mexico and Alaska on exactly how and why people's ballots end up in this garbage can, okay? So just bear with me here, but if people only voted for Horse Crap, didn't rank anybody else, for one example, they go in the garbage can. If they did the case of voting for Horse Crap for all 4 times, because that's the only one they like, Horse Crap, for whatever reason, represents the values, they go in the garbage can. Round 2. Who gets the least votes in round 2? It's Lukewarm Smiles. Okay, anybody that then had him ranked gets reallocated again to Kathy America and to Patty Poison, and again, some more votes are in the garbage can. And by the way, this is not an imaginary figure. We have several states and municipalities where I'm going to share some data and percentages with you about just how many ballots get thrown into the garbage can with ranked choice voting. And you'll notice here the denominator starts to change. Right here in round 1, we had 100 ballots counted. In round 2, we have 96. And by round 3, we're left with 92 ballots that are actually being counted. So all of a sudden, the denominator has changed from 100 ballots to 92. And this is important when we start talking about a true majority, okay? So, well, look what just happened here. Patty Boysen actually pulled it off at the end. But here's the interesting thing. She actually didn't even get the true majority. 47 divided by 100 is less than 50%. Hopefully you're following. It's kind of a complicated scheme, by the way, I'm just saying. And then 8% of the ballots were tossed. Okay, so I just wanted to walk you through an example of what we're talking about and how it would actually look in practice. So, this is important too, and I know you touched on it, but we have to understand who's funding it. And let me tell you something. Pro-Prop 1 folks have big money, and I'm going to show you. We're being outspent probably 5-1 in our own state of Idaho. More than half of their money is coming from out of state. Most of that money from out of state is coming from dark money PACs, and I'll prove it to you. First thing is, though, I want to tell you there are basically 3 distinct factions behind Proposition 1 as far as I can tell. There are some establishment Republicans. The former governor, Bruce Otter, he's for Prop 1. Interesting, right? Anybody know who and what IACI is? The Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. If you don't know it, look it up. You better know who they are. They're a industry group that, quite frankly, they're proponents of illegal immigrants coming to Idaho because it's cheap labor for their industry, okay? They've got big money and they're lobbying in Boise every day. So a lot of the establishment Republicans that you see, they are directly linked to IACI and their money. Second group, partisans. That's fair, I'm a partisan, I'm conservative. We have other partisans here too, and don't let anybody tell you Reclaim Idaho is nonpartisan. Right? Luke Mayville, the co-founder, wrote an academic paper, How to Turn Rural Red America Progressive. Okay, so we can all be honest about who we are and what we stand for. So Reclaim Idaho, their recent social media manager, by the way, celebrated a political act of arson in Sandpoint when a business that was owned by a conservative was burned to the ground. She took to social media and celebrated that. Is that moderate behavior? Yeah, the recent social media manager, her name was Alicia Abbott, you can look it up. She celebrated that act of arson in Sandpoint. This is what we see in Boise right now. So we have no on Prop 1 signs going up. And look what the moderates are doing to our signs. This all just happened in the last few days. Okay? This is now happening in Kootenai County too, by the way. Both Trump and no on Prop 1 signs. And I'd ask you, is that moderate behavior? No, it's not. Let's talk about the money. There are multiple groups behind Prop 1. This is one of them, Idahoans for Open Primaries, based on last month's report that had $1 million in the bank. There are other groups too, though, like Veterans for Idaho Voters, and I'm probably going to miss a few others. And through September, they had $2 million. Where does that money come from? Well, let's just look at this group. Oh, who's this? United America PAC. 285,000. United America, Denver, 100,000. Google United America and you see who they are. Rich people, millionaires, even a few billionaires, mostly out of DC, dark money. You don't really know where the money comes from. And they're pouring into Prop 1 in Idaho to change Idaho state law. It's kind of weird, right? Why? Is it because they care about the people? No. Probably not, right? So we'll talk about what the motivation could be. So we're being outspent, like I said, 5-1. So there's a couple of operating theories. If you're a partisan, you want to change the Idaho state law because you're never going to win an election if you're a progressive. Makes sense. You got to give them credit. If I'm a progressive, I'd be all for this in a heartbeat. It gives me more of a chance of winning at the ballot box. Fair is fair, okay? But what about the big money people? What's in it for them, right? Well, if you look at the jungle primary and you see all those 48 candidates, and you realize anybody can claim to be with any party, right? All of a sudden that state party, for instance, the Idaho GOP, their influence, their vetting influence is lost, it's gone, it's completely disintegrated. And now everybody has to rush to the middle and chase for the most money they can have without being vetted by any one party or the other. And so guess who gets to buy those politicians at the end of the day? The same people that are donating to Proposition 1. So it's about usurping, I would argue, not just the political party's power, but actually our own influence in voting at the end of the day. So let me give you some evidence now, okay? This is not subjective opinion. I'm going to give you some evidence from across different states on how they've experienced ranked choice voting and the detrimental impact it's had. So, obviously RCV is harder for voters, and I got to check every once in a while to see. And you can see the headlines, and we can imagine why it's harder for voters, right? If you have a jungle primary with like 48 candidates, what do you do as a regular voter? And then you got to do that for like 10 other offices on the ballot. It's super hard, it's confusing, it's time consuming. And in another slide, I'm going to show you what that does to voter turnout, okay? There's only one study out there that says somehow ranked choice voting increases voter turnout, and I'm happy to address that if anybody wants to challenge me on that. It was a very poorly constructed study. So, this is what ranked choice voting would look like on our Idaho ballot. I think I got this one from Alaska. So you can see you've got 4444, and then you got 4444. So instead of that, one bubble, you've got to do 4 bubbles now, okay? So a lot more bubbles, a lot more time consuming. It does lead to longer lines and longer processing time. I couldn't find good studies on exactly how much longer, but common sense would tell us it's going to take people longer to process this, okay? It's expensive. So our county clerk mentioned it's going to cost up to $40 million. This obviously came from the Secretary of State. In the voter guide, unfortunately, you're only going to see the fiscal impact statement written by the pro-Prop 1 folks. That's kind of a disappointment, I have to say, because the Secretary of State's on record, after interviewing several other of his peers across the country, it's going to cost the state of Idaho $25 to $40 million, okay? And there it is, right here. It would likely cost at least $25 to $40 million to replace the existing equipment through the state. That does not include voter education, by the way. So when we look at Alaska spent over $1 million just trying to do voter education. For Idaho, it's probably going to be even more. So this seems rather provocative. It silences voters. Really? Would hyperbole much? Well, let me try to explain it and give you some examples. Santa Fe, New Mexico. Okay? This was a public records request. Spent $350,000 in voter education just for Santa Fe. So 20,000 people voted for mayor for this ranked choice voting race. That was about $17.50 per voter that the municipality spent on that race. But here's the kicker, okay? In the election for that mayor's race, when they didn't have ranked choice voting, they had about 136 what we call spoiled ballots. I mean, somebody made a mistake. They forgot to fill out a bubble, they filled out too many, they undervoted, overvoted, they made a mistake. With ranked choice voting, it went up 650%. Confusing, complicated, disenfranchising. And here's some examples, real-world examples from our Freedom of Information request where we can see how people made mistakes. So you don't only want to see 4 bubbles. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is what we call overvoting. So this ballot got tossed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This ballot got tossed, right? I mean, I don't even know what's going through this person's mind, but regardless, it was confusing for them. That's a tragic laugh, right? And here, again, the list goes on and on. I have all 900 spoiled ballots from that, I think it's the Santa Fe election. This is undervoting and duplicate ranking, so they got tossed as well. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. The Prop 1 passes. Bet your bottom dollar this is gonna happen in Idaho. It destroys transparency. We already talked about that. I don't have to beat a dead horse here, but it now gets thrown to an algorithm and a computer in Boise. Nobody can hand verify it anymore. It's subject to potential manipulation too. Remember that first question I asked? Does this build or damage trust? If you go throw it off to an algorithm and a computer machine in Boise, is that going to build trust? No, it's not. It's unfair to older and new voters. I'll show you. So it actually represses voter turnout for older and newer voters because it's intimidating and it's confusing. So one study, McDaniels, San Francisco State, he looked at Minneapolis and San Francisco, and he saw approximately a 3 to 5 percentage point dip in voter turnout with cities that did RCV. When you actually look at the newer voters, the older voters, it was close to 5 to 10%, by the way. That's significant. Okay? Minneapolis Council President, voter turnout was the worst in nearly 100 years. The last time we had such a low percentage was before women had a right to vote. They expected, when they introduced ranked choice voting, a 75% turnout. Let me show you what they got. 33%. Okay? So, it's harder for election administrators. We already heard from him. I don't have to go too deep into there, but a lot of changes have to be made.
Rick Hoggle, he went on record actually saying to vote no. I understand why most county clerks don't want to do that because it is a nonpartisan role, and I respect that. But he still tells us why it's going to be complicated for him, and the logistics involved are almost prohibitive. And it doesn't guarantee a majority. This is really important because the Proposition 1 proponents claim you'll always get a majority winner. It's not true. Remember I showed you that you change the denominator as the votes keep getting tossed? Eventually you can have 51%, but not of all of the ballots cast. You're going to have 51% of a subset. So obviously the definition of the majority, RCV promotes and promises a majority winner, but that's because it's redefined. They only determine a winner based on the majority of the remaining ballots after all the others have been tossed into the garbage can. Okay? And that's why they said in their language, how is RCV ballot tallied? By the majority of active ballots, right? That means the ones remaining that they didn't make a mistake or they didn't get tossed for some reason. So, let me look at this example here. Some of these slides are new. I've been working with a lot of other counterparts across the country, and I'm constantly curating new evidence to show you what Prop 1 can do. So, they examined 600,000 ballots, and as a result of ballot exhaustion, the winner in all of our cases received less than a majority of the total votes cast. A finding that raises serious concerns about ranked choice voting and challenges a key argument made by the system's proponents. And this was a study done by Burnett and Kogan. And I'm happy to share any of these studies offline with you guys. Okay? Judge Berzon here in the 9th Federal Court, he said no matter how you look at it, it's not a majority vote, it's a plurality vote, it's still a plurality system. The Deputy City Attorney in San Francisco said, I agree, Your Honor, it does not guarantee a majority. That's absolutely true. So, here are some municipalities and states that actually implemented RCV and have since repealed it. So it's good to look at these places, and you can Google it again and see, why did Aspen get rid of it? Why did Burlington get rid of it? Pierce County, so on and so forth. A lot of folks have tried it, and they decided this wasn't right for us. And in Pierce County, Washington, here's a good example. They did a resolution, and I'll read it to you. This is when they got rid of ranked choice voting after their terrible experience. Whereas the cost of running the IRV, instant runoff voting, portion of the 2008 general election was $1.7 million. That's for the county. Whereas the IRV portion of the 2008 general election provided to be expensive, complicated, and confusing, and the results of the IRV races were not available for weeks following the election date. And that's another problem I didn't talk about, is the delay in getting results. And I'm going to show you some case studies from a few states before we go. 66% of the 90,000 voters responding to the auditor survey indicated that they did not like it, whereas the council finds that amendments to the charter to eliminate instant runoff voting and restore the primary election for county elected officials will serve the needs and best interests of the citizens of Pierce County. So hopefully that gives you a taste of what a lot of municipalities have experienced with ranked choice voting. 20 cities experimented with it in Utah. None of these cities have decided to use it again in their next elections. Now let me give you some top-line case studies. Alaska, we talked about Alaska. Now, I'm not going to make the argument RCV turned Alaska blue. It can be debatable. It's a constructive debate to have. In the first round of ranked choice voting, the Republicans got 60% though, okay? The Democrat ended up winning that race when all the rounds of RCV were calculated. So that's why some people say it turned Alaska blue. It's a little more nuanced, but still it's something to pay attention to. It cost the state a lot more money. I think it was like $11 million when all was said and done. That was a 328% increase in running elections in Alaska. Almost 15,000 ballots were tossed for all the reasons I just mentioned. The results took 15 days to certify. Okay, 15 days. Trust? Build trust? No. And we mentioned the 48 candidates in the primary. California, they picked the wrong winner. And here's the worst part. The wrong winner got seated in their office until they finally figured it out, and they had to put the other guy in the office. True story. San Francisco, we talked about lower voter turnout. In Maine, a lot of ballots were tossed, and they got a winner who didn't have the majority. We talked about that. And in Maine, it was 61% of the winners did not actually have a majority. Okay? And then New York, they announced the winner 1 month later. 140,000 votes were thrown out. That's 15% of the ballots tossed. So you typically see in ranked choice voting a tossed ballot range from 4 upwards to 29%, depending on the municipality and state. Okay? This just goes to show what happens when you depend on computers. 135,000 test ballots were counted by mistake. Okay? They finally caught that one as well. This is what happens. So, I'm going to leave you with this question. Will Prop 1's jungle primaries and ranked choice voting increase or decrease trust in Idaho's election system? Yeah, I'm not going to answer for you. I'll let you make up your own mind for you. And that's all I have. And I just wanted to share with you, if you actually, I'm going to put my nonpartisan hat on, because at the end of the day, I am working with independents and Democrats here with this organization, okay? I'm going to take my conservative Tribune County resident out. And we're here to make Idaho elections more secure, full stop. I don't care what political party you're a member of. We've got a lot of work to do. I told you we're ranked like 28th in the union. We want to be ranked in the top 5. But then we've got a lot of work to do. It's going to probably start with absentee votes. They're totally subject to a lot of exploitation, so that's probably going to be our first project. And I just want to say thank you and open it up to questions. Who came up with this program? Probably from the ivory tower. They come up with the most amazing ideas that when they meet reality, it just doesn't quite work out according to their theory. There is some real history behind ranked choice voting. I mean, you can go back a few hundred years to other countries where they actually implement it. And in smaller races and very particular scenarios, ranked choice voting actually could work. It's just when it comes to something like statewide, even countywide, municipalities, it just doesn't work. But I told you who wanted it and why. It's not about the people. Anybody else? Yeah.
This is a prime example of how we have a problem and somebody brings it to note and say, well, we'll fix that problem. Well, I'm strong for voters' rights and voters' responsibility. But in order to provide a right to vote, deranged people and whoever come up with all this garbage here, there's no other term for it.
Well, it's a solution in search of a problem, okay? That's why I showed the trust in our current election system. It works, it's not broken, it's relatively high trust. So I always ask that question, why would anybody want to mess with that? Yeah.
Are there any polls that show how people are leaning in this state?
Yes, yes. So you guys might have all noticed this too. So I'm going to lay it all out there. The proponents of Prop 1 are going to call it open primaries all day long. Open primaries. The media, of course, they echo the progressives. Open primaries, open primaries. You notice we call it ranked choice voting, right? So when you look at polling, open primaries as a concept, without people understanding what the implications are, is more popular among progressives and slightly more popular among unaffiliated, slightly less popular among Republicans. There's a surprising number of Republicans that think they're for it. Ranked choice voting is dead on arrival. The only people that support that are Democrats and progressives. Unaffiliated don't like it, Republicans absolutely hate it. So that's why you're probably seeing the difference in language from the pro-Prop 1 and the anti-Prop 1 folks.
But on the ballot, will it be obvious that we're talking ranked choice voting, not just open primary?
Good question. So she's asking about the language on the ballot. So there's a voter guide that's coming out for the first time from the Secretary of State. So anybody from California, Washington, or Oregon, you're going to recognize it's going to be that boring black and white thing with all the ballot text and the pro and con arguments. I have to say, I was very disappointed to learn 2 days ago that it's actually got a title for Prop 1 in the voter guide that says Open Primaries Act. Like, really, Phil McGrane? Really? But anyway, so that's the voter guide. Some people will make decisions by reading the voter guide before they go to the ballot. When you actually go to the voting booth in the ballot, it's going to be more detailed. Like, I wish I had it here. It doesn't say Open Primaries Act, and you're going to see ranked choice voting right up there near the top. Yeah?
One thing I think is really important to point out here, again, is that it doesn't matter, and it's true, I must say it's true what I'm about to say, we do not have to rank our choices in the general. We can pick one, and you know what? If we pick the one that's the lowest one on the thing, sure, we don't get who we want. But that's the way it's done now, too, in our state. If we pick somebody that doesn't win, stop calling it, throw it in the trash. It's not going to win. That's all there is to it. But please, everybody, just for one thing, it truly is ranked choice voting choice. You don't have to do that. I've been working with this for a year now. And I'm one of 2,000 volunteers here in Idaho who have been working on this as a grassroots group. We're called Idaho Women's for Open Primaries for a reason, because it's an open primary thing. You don't have to rank your choices. You don't have to choose more than one. Okay? And if you happen to choose the right one, who everybody else wants, you're going to lose your vote.
But other people get a second shot. It's not one man, one vote.
It's one man, one vote. One woman, one vote. One adult per vote.
So technically, and I did mention that, technically you are correct, and that is a claim from the Prop 1 proponents. You don't have to rank and vote for everybody. You're absolutely right about that. You do run the risk, of course, though, of your ballot being tossed. Now, that's only one reason why your ballot might be tossed. I covered the other reasons, right? Because of the confusion and complexity. That's indisputable, okay? Now, a lot of people would say, I only want to vote for the candidate that represents my principles, beliefs, and values. And of those 4, only one does it, and the other 3 I find totally repugnant. But if I don't rank those other 3 that I find repugnant, my voice might be diminished, ultimately, in those subsequent rounds. But you're correct. Technically, you're totally correct.
Well, there's no way I'm going to be able to counteract all the things you said tonight.
I'm going to ask a question.
There's so many people here that do really want no primaries, no red choice voting. And that's fine. It's everybody's right. That's what makes us the country that we're in. It's what makes us a state that we're in. So that's okay. But please check it out.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't want to engage in a debate, but I think I would just ask the question, can we repeat why the clerk did not like this? Which, if I remember correctly, was we cannot validate our own votes in our county and make sure that it's actually what it's supposed to be. So all arguments aside about ranked choice voting, is that not what I'm understanding, that the ranked choice voting system has to be sent in a black box and counted away?
If there are 3 choices, like 2 candidates were write-in or 3 candidates, and there is no clear majority, I can't tell you who wins.
Yeah, and so that alone, like the fact that you just lose control over it, to me seems doesn't make any sense.
So what do we need for trust? We need transparency and accountability. We lose that transparency.
People we know, people we can look in the eye and say, this is, does this look right, what they're saying up on the screen for the state or whatever? That to me carries a lot of weight.
Thank you.
I think the most important thing is to understand this thing. And the current system, we already know, the one that gets the most votes wins. Okay? And nobody's vote gets thrown out. You may say the ones that lost got thrown out. No, they're all counted. It's done once. If you want to, let's say less than 30%, you can have a runoff election where everybody gets to vote again. Other states do that. And we've got to keep it simple so people understand and basically trust the system. 66% is not enough for trust. It should be 100%. And any kind of manipulation, all these fog and these black boxes just makes people angry. They can't understand.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
I believe Linda Poston is the county clerk in this county. Was she invited to this event?
Everyone was invited, the whole public. I mean, I've had signs all over town for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and yes.
Did somebody reach out to ask her personally?
I spoke with her at the fair and asked her if she would like to speak about this.
And she said?
No.
No. Okay, I just think I appreciate the clerk coming from Bonner County.
Yes.
But it sure would be nice to hear from our own clerk in Fountain.
She has a nonpartisan office. She's supposed to keep it nonpartisan, and she doesn't want to look like she's choosing sides. And I understand that, and that's her prerogative.
Okay.
Can I add something there? All your signs that say no on one meeting, that's pretty definite.
None of them say no on one meeting.
There are tons of them. I've got pictures of them. I can take pictures all over town. No on one meeting, no on Prop 1 meeting means that you're gonna talk no on Prop 1 meeting. So that doesn't make it a nonpartisan, it doesn't make
All of our signs say, what will Prop 1 do to your vote?
I blame Glenda for not wanting to be here because it didn't sound like an open meeting.
We're not monitoring. We are not monitoring.
Yeah, I know. I know it.
And but I want to. So first of all, let's all hear from Bonner's County Clerk, please.
So, as far as voting goes, as I said when we started, everybody is affiliated with the party. Some are strong conservatives, some are strong Democrats. But every one of us has to be dead neutral when it comes to election. And we want every Republican, every Democrat, every Libertarian to have 100% confidence when we count the votes, everybody needs to know it's a perfect report. And so that's why all the clerks have to be very careful what they say. I can tell you the technical difficulties. Of course I have my own opinion. I vote the way I vote on all the issues. But as far as election office, everybody has to have faith that we are going to do a perfect job regardless of what party we are. And that's why it's very difficult for the clerks of all people to say, even though we know the most, we hold the standard that everybody can trust. So that's why people don't want to vote.
Thank you.
And on Rick's, I was the other co-signer on Rick's. But just so you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'd like to just comment on the idea that we're losing our ability to, we lose our rights as voters if we vote for Prop 1, because, I knew that this would be, it's founded, it's the, Republican Women hosting this. I knew that this would be, I live here, I know my town, neighbors before politics, right? So I knew there would be the right-wing slant on this, but it really bothers me that for me, the reason for voting for this would be to make both sides more accountable, right? It's not about finding moderation where moderation is we lose all of our morals and we can scapegoat, members of our population and whatnot. To me, it's about accountability, right? Instead of just blaming, trans people or immigrants, we actually have to put up and say, hey, we're going to do this work. And that's something that this current system doesn't allow for. It's creating more divisiveness. And so, I've learned a lot. It definitely has changed my view on this, but I just wish that when we came together as a community, we could have these discussions without resorting to the far extremes of, only being presented with, the far right, in this case, views on this. It's hard to find it's hard to look through the propaganda.
Yeah, I agree. I challenge you on the far right label quite a bit. I challenge you all day long on that, by the way. However, I agree with your sentiment. I do want to share with you my personal experience, however, about open and constructive dialogue. We're having an open Q&A here. We're welcoming pro-Prop 1 folks to ask their questions and have a conversation with us ultimately. I can tell you that has not been my experience with the pro-Prop 1 events. I told you the co-founder of Reclaim Idaho, who was committed to a debate with me, he ducked it. You can ask Boise State about that one. I can tell you that in Coeur d'Alene, the forum that I mentioned, they're framing it as a pro and con. Every person on that panel is pro. That's AstroTurf, sorry. And they're not allowing live Q&A like we're doing here. Pre-written questions only. Why? And then, I'm just disappointed because I want that open and constructive dialogue. Because if we're going to get rid of that divisiveness, we all need to be able to have this conversation like we're having now civilly. So I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Yeah.
I am conservative, but I like to bring forward some feelings that I've heard from moderates because, they although a lot of moderates to Democrats are for open primaries, I've heard them say, I wish ranked choice wasn't attached to this. You know, they're for the one part of it, and you see that polling, and I'm hearing it over and over again, and they aren't for the ranked choice part of this. I've heard it from an elected official. My husband has heard it from another official who's running, who are both, you know, some might say moderate, some might say Democrat, but both of those men said, the one that spoke to my husband said, I don't like ranked choice voting. And the one that spoke to me said, I wish it wasn't attached to this. People don't like it, it's confusing. You know, so even the people that are for open primaries, most of them don't seem to want the ranked choice voting. And that's why they're kind of hiding it, they're burying it. It's the second thing mentioned, and it's the second thing in order the primary comes first and the general comes second, but it's also the second thing listed on the ballot. So if somebody only reads the first couple of words, they're only going to read the top 4 primary part, and they're not going to even read that it has a ranked choice general. And either way, you know, I think the ballot flooding is probably the worst. And some people say the fraud would be the worst, but I think the ballot flooding is going to cause so much problems. Right now, you know, people try not to split the vote, and so then they might not run because they don't want to split the vote. And this is supposed to fix that so everybody can run, but that's not a good thing. We don't want, you know, 20 candidates running for each spot. That is too much for us to learn about, and that means that we're not going to bother at all. And that means that we've lost our vote.
And polling actually reflects that. So unaffiliated are slightly more favorable to open primaries. They're very unfavorable to ranked choice voting. I think when you actually ask people that what are open primaries, they don't understand what it is. It sounds good, right? It sounds great on the surface. And then when you realize you might get 48 candidates on the ballot, it tends to change some people's opinions when they actually see it in practice. Yeah, go ahead.
My concern is I had a top security clearance, and I had to submit a lot of information to the FBI. They got hacked. My information's out there. And so that's my primary concern here is the lack of accountability between the county and Boise. Going to a mainframe, all that voter information is going to go to a mainframe in Boise, and nobody's going to know. I mean, the county clerks won't even be able to track it. I think it's a problem. I really do. If we can't even secure our FBI, we're in trouble.
Thank you.
I agree.
In the back.
I don't know if I can ask a question quickly there, but I know you guys certify an election. Every clerk in Iowa does, and you already have staff that comes in before the election. You have educated poll workers. You have this policy they're going through. You're going to have so many documents and policies that will have to change for ranked choice.
Yes.
How much time, like the budget of honor and the boundary county to allocate to new poll workers? I know you guys have, don't you have a central voting location already? You take ballot researchers, they come in to your courthouse?
We have a central count location, and as far as the money, that's not clear on who pays for it. We pay for it either out of our state tax dollars or our local county tax, our income tax or county tax, is how we pay for it.
And you certify that with the commissioner, so you or you're going in and
We won't be able to know. That's a great question, a great point. We won't be able to certify those races. There's no way we can certify. We can certify how many ballots go out and how many we scan. We cannot certify the results.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Can I ask a question on that? Can I have-
Please, go ahead.
Sir?
Yes.
If a miracle happens, and this gets passed in November, and it's challenged by Attorney General Labrador, and it survives your system's already and be able to do that reasonably priced, or we do end up like Maine did and spend 50 cents per voter. I'm more than happy to spend 50 cents on me as a voter to have it done. But if that happens, and if the equipment is there, they can do the ranked choice voting. Will that change things for you as a county clerk?
Let me just say one thing, sorry. Maine is not a good analog for what's in Idaho. County by county, we have a much, I'm just saying, we have a much more disparate system here in Idaho. It costs much more than 50 cents. We're not Maine. It's very different. You can laugh at me. I'm addressing part of your question.
I just want to use that as an example. If we get corrected and we get decent equipment in that will take care of the ranked choice voting, that process, will that change what happens with your county?
So she's saying if we have money and we have the machines with the software, would that change how the county would respond or the effort put into it? I think the answer lies with the gentleman that's sitting behind you. The problem is we have to ship our data to Boise because Bonner County and Boundary County don't have one machine. We have to communicate on multiple people races. We have to let somebody else tell us who wins. We can't determine it.
I understand that, but what's changed though is we got all new equipment. No,
we still have to go over the internet and we have to send it to Boise. And if it's just a boundary of honor, it still has to go over the internet. That's the problem. That's what he's saying. If it can get hacked with the strong security imaginable, it certainly could get hacked at this point. Yep.
We've got time for 2 more questions. Go ahead.
I thought that you said that it's really not open primaries. It's really a jungle primary, and they're calling it open primaries.
Well, that's because open primaries surveys and polls much better.
Right. So it's really not what we're signing up for.
Yeah,
even
it's
with the
accurate. It's
open
going to jungle primary. Yes.
I just want to make sure everybody understands. Now, we've been sitting here now for over an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. And we've seen the complications, right? This is not a simple thing. We get it, okay? We've all been educated now. We know how this is going to work. Come November, there's a lot of people out there that have no idea, okay? And they're going to be hit with this, and open primary sounds wonderful, and that's all that's really being pushed on that side. It doesn't contain ranked choice, but they don't talk about that. So it's very simple for those people to be easily thinking, oh, that sounds great, and turn around and vote for this, and it's going to be a disaster. It can be a disaster. And it's going to be almost impossible to get rid of after the fact. So this group now, this is a fairly small group, but we all understand it. Pro or against, we all understand it. People need to know this has to be spread to other people out there because they're not going to go to the website to learn how to vote. There's going to be the whole, we got to teach these people how to fill out a ballot. Well, they're not going to know that when they walk into the polls in 26, right? It's going to be a lot of money. It's complicated. People need to understand it. The open primary thing, that's a discussion. There are people that are for it. There are people that are against it. We've had it. We got rid of it. You know, that's a separate issue. If they want to bring that up and have to legislate that or have even this kind of thing for that, that's fine and dandy. You can't bundle these two, right? And this is not an open primary. It's not about an open primary. We can have that discussion. This is not that. I just want to make sure.
So my recommendation to anybody who wants to talk to anybody else, do more showing and less telling. So I showed you 2 things. I showed you what an open primary ballot looks like with 48 candidates. You can get that from the elections office in Alaska. And I showed you what an RCV ballot looks like. Show any regular Idahoan those 2 things, and that's all you have to do. Last question.
Well, mine is more of a statement, you know. Here, this is going to cost the taxpayers more money. We don't even have the money to build a decent jail in this town, let alone bringing on new voting stuff. You know,
That's all I
And it's an open question where that money is gonna come from. Is it coming from essential services, county by county? Is it coming from the state? We don't really know. It's an open question. Yeah. Thank you everybody so much for attending. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. So our table at the back, and Michael has a table at the back as well. We're taking silent auction bids on the Trump flag and the patriotic wreath. And we also have information back there on this Proposition 1. If you'd like to take some and share it with your neighbors, that'd be great. Prop 1, no Prop 1 signs are free, and the Trump signs are 15. Thank you so much.